and I don't want it to be super blurry, so that's why I've put my camera at f11. Good morning, welcome to the channel. It's a beautiful morning. We are in the forest. I'm here because I did my first one-on-one workshop, and the woman that I had to train, she lives close by to this beautiful forest. My plan was to shoot after the one-on-one to make a new video, but it was just gray and rainy. The compositions didn't come to life. I wanted some light on those compositions. So that's why I'm back here in the forest to hopefully gonna shoot some beautiful compositions. This forest has some cool little rivers. If you watch my videos regularly, you probably noticed that I've been away for a few weeks. I started working at a new company. The learning program is so intense that's taking a lot of my time away to shoot some videos and also for my family. So the days that I'm off, I try to spend them most with my family. And also 2 weeks ago, I got a nasty eye infection. I will pop up a photo of it, but it's like I was transforming in a zombie or something. It was like apocalypse red eyes. It was very nasty. I couldn't keep my eyes open for like 2 minutes. It starts hurting and itching and always tearing up. Not a nice sight. So that's why I was away for a few weeks. But I'm back. Let's start talking about photography, because in the last few weeks I got the question a lot about what are your settings, but most of the time I can't remember anymore what the settings are. But most of the times I always try to tell in my videos what settings that I'm using for the pictures that I'm taking, and most of the time it's like ISO 100, f8 or between f11. And then the shutter speed, it depends on what I want to try to capture. Do I want to have a longer shutter speed, or do I have to have a fast shutter speed? It all depends. But first, I'm gonna start looking for the compositions that we're gonna shoot, because the sunlight slowly starts to shine into the forest. That means the compositions that I want to get are getting lit up by the sun. Let's go. And half an hour later I finally found a composition. Not one of the compositions that I had in mind, because I got lost a little bit in this forest here. It's the second time coming here. That's why I got a little bit lost, but that doesn't matter. We're here for the photos. And what? Some goose. And the composition that I found is here in between those beautiful trees. Between those trees there's a branch covered with moss, like it's coming out of the ground. The sunlight is letting it up. It's letting it up from behind, and on the side of that branch the moss is lit up. And I also framed it so the tree or that branch is in between those two big trees. So I'm framing the frame with a natural frame. We got a little bit of that gray bluish haze in the landscape, or in the forest. The settings that I'm using for this photo: ISO 100 for this photo, f8 and 25 of a second. My shutter speed is 25 because I don't need to bump it up. There's no wind, there's nothing moving. I can leave it like it is. ISO also at 100 because I don't need to bump up my ISO to bump up my shutter speed. I leave it like that. And then f8 because I want a lot of this in focus, but I also want the background a little bit blurry, so that's why I'm using f8, focused on the branch, and the background is a little bit out of focus. The first one for the video, and let's hope I will find my way to the composition that I had in mind.
12 seconds later.
While I was putting away my gear, I saw a small branch just in front of me with just 2 leaves on it. They are yellow and some dew on the leaves, and it got lit up from the sun. So I focused on those little leaves, and we got a beautiful, very minimalist photo of those 2 leaves. Let me know what you think of this photo. I'm surprised by myself that I'm taking photos like this, because normally I'm not doing this minimalistic photography. But I shot it at ISO 100, 20th of a second. Last photo was 25 of a second. This one is 28 of a second at f8. And I framed this little branch or a little tree from the previous photo is in the back, so you can still see it a little bit. The background is also very blurry because I want this branch with the two leaves on it to be the main subject of this picture and be a very, how do you say it, a calming photo, so there's not a lot of distractions. So it's only this little tree with the branches, this little branch with the two leaves. Now I'm gonna move on. I'm struggling a little bit to find a good composition. Here in the back there's a little tree. The day of the workshop it was overcast and my student was learning how to use the shutter speed, ISO and your F number to create depth of field in your picture. And on that day there's a little tree here. It has some brownish leaves on its branches still. It stood out from all the rest. But now with the sunlight shining through the forest, it got a little bit messy. I don't know if I'm gonna wait for it to try to shoot it. And also we got some water over here that's curving, and I'm trying to find the composition with that. It all looks a little bit messy with the lights on the trees and the light not being on the places that I want. But I'm gonna look for a good composition. I had this in mind to shoot something with the water, so I want to have a picture with it, but I don't want to just have a picture with it. I want to have a nice picture with it, with some leading lines that are leading our eyes into the frame. I just found an okay composition with a little tree that I had in mind to shoot, but it's not the composition that I previously had in mind. What I'm doing here is I'm super low to the ground because here in the water I'm using the reflection of this little tree because it's lit up. So my foreground is actually a little bit darker because there's no sunlight here in this little river, but the tree is lit up and I'm using a shallow depth of field because the background is a little bit messy because the sun is shining onto the trees. But I want to focus on this little tree, so I'm using f4. I'm using the Tamron 70 to 300 and the lowest f number on this lens is f4 at 70 millimeters. I hope we're gonna have a beautiful lit up tree in the reflection and also this tree here. And in Lightroom I'm gonna try to decrease the light from everything else around this little tree and only make the tree pop out of this image. And the first composition that I had in mind was from shooting on this little bridge towards this little tree. But then again, in the composition we have this big tree that's blocking our eye from going deeper into the picture. Or at least in my mind it's blocking me. It wasn't perfect for me, so that's why I went a little bit closer. I'm using ISO 100 f4 and the shutter speed of 120th of a second. I just shot our next composition. I'm still very close to the water because I'm still trying to capture those beautiful curves in this little river. I can't find a good composition to show the curves, but I found a fern plant on the edge of the water and the sunlight is lighting it up very hard actually because I had to bump up my shutter speed a lot to not overexpose the leaves of the fern. And again I'm shooting a minimalist photo and around this fern we got some moss covering this rock where the fern is living on, and just in front of our camera there's also a patch of moss that I'm using to have a little bit of a foreground element, but it's so close to the camera that the moss in front of us is just a blurry green patch, but that creates a little bit for a depth of field in this photo. The sun is so hard that I really had to bump up my shutter speed and everything around it is a little bit dark. In Lightroom I can easily pull back those blacks and the shadows. And again I've put my camera in portrait orientation. It worked out a little bit more to capture this beautiful picture. I'm using again ISO 100, 40th of a second. I'm shooting this at f11 because we have a patch of moss in front of our lens and I don't want it to be super blurry, so that's why I've put my camera at f11 and also to capture a little bit more into the frame, into the background. because it's also beautiful when the sun is lighting up all the moss around it. And the reason that I'm going a little bit more minimalistic in these pictures is because all the leaves in this forest are gone, or almost all the leaves are gone. Everything looks a little bit dead. I'm trying to capture the beautiful smaller details in this landscape because we still got some greens on the ground because of the moss, but for the rest, if you look up, it's just blue sky and empty trees. I want to tell you this for all the people asking me what settings that I'm using. In landscape photography, if there's no wind or almost no wind and I don't need to have a fast shutter speed to freeze everything in the frame, I'm using ISO 100 most of the time, and my shutter speed depending on the light that I have to let into my sensor. For the depth of field, it also depends how much do you want to have in focus into your landscape, but most of the time I'm between f8 or f11 like the previous photo. I'm always around those settings. Don't be afraid to bump up your ISO because it will put some noise in your pictures. The noise is easily removed in Lightroom or Photoshop or other programs. And that's it. If you are in Belgium, or if you are from Belgium and if you want to have a one-on-one workshop, contact me and I will learn you the basics of photography. Thank you for watching and I will see you next time. Bye bye.